This is Beyond a Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get on. Get it on. And welcome to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, I should say, about the best 15 minutes in the universe. Mark is in parts unknown.
No, I'm in New Jersey. Just got back from Greece and hopefully flying back to do a full kind of Reasonable Doubt Best Hour in the Universe in studio with my BFF.
Can't wait to see you in the flesh. All right. So what's on your mind? Yes.
I have a question. You know, I don't know if people understand the research we do. We've got this great researcher named Brett, so lawyer. He's got a new baby, which is why he's up all night doing research for us. And he spends all this time doing all of this research. And then 2 minutes before the show, I find something that reminds me of you. And I was watching this just 4 minutes ago. And you remember our last, I think it was you had a clip of Sanjay Gupta questioning Dr. Fauci on natural immunity. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. This NBA player from Orlando, I believe, and it's already started to go viral, did a really, really good, I don't know what it was, minute and a half, 2 minutes of basically channeling his inner Adam Carolla. Have you seen this?
I heard it. I have not seen it. It's definitely been making the rounds as we do this. It's going to take Gary a minute to summon it. But
Gary wants to hit me for doing this to him. But I've been struggling with your natural immunities argument that you were making because it strikes me that so far from a legal standpoint, the only thing that is going to carry the day based on the current COVID constitution is a religious exemption. But this argument and what you pointed out and what the NBA player very thoughtfully and I thought in a nuanced manner argued has a scientific or a secular basis that I think it's going to be hard to get around if you get in front of the right court. Now, I say this because there is a crisis. I just left New York and I landed. They've declared a state of emergency to bring in the National Guard because there is a edict that went down mandating vaccination, and healthcare workers have basically in large numbers balked at that. And now they have basically a public health crisis in the state of New York, and they're going to have to call in the National Guard. And it's setting up an interesting legal issue here.
Well, these are all things we saw coming down the road, which is if you're going to have vaccine passports and mandates, otherwise people can't attend restaurants or sporting events or get into public buildings. And an overwhelming, statistically, number of people in New York who aren't vaccinated are African American, then you're setting up, you're flying in the face of all the voter ID stuff. So you've been decreeing how unfair voter ID is to the African American community for the last number of years. And on the heels of that argument, you're now saying that the African American community who is not vaccinated nearly statistically to the levels of the Asian or the white community can no longer go into restaurants without proving they're vaccinated. You are setting the table for this controversy and this argument to break out. And it's the same with the natural immunity. If the decree is one size fits all, everyone needs to be vaccinated, your thin, healthy 12-year-old son needs to be vaccinated, there's a couple of things. First off, there is not an infinite amount of vaccinations. These are a thing, and vaccines, I should say, and they need to be allocated in a way that makes sense. Give them to the elderly first. Give them to first responders and healthcare workers first. Give them to people with diabetes and obesity and pre-existing conditions. Eventually, when all of that has been has been dispersed, then you can get to the 11-year-old boys or the healthy NBA players who may have had COVID and have natural immunity. But every day that goes on, there's a better argument for people who have natural immunity not getting vaccinated essentially a second time because they have natural immunity. And then also, it kind of begs the question, the narrative is the people that don't want to get vaccinated are all these MAGA hat wearing, Trump supporting guys in Mississippi. Well, then how do you explain all the healthcare workers, the nurses in Manhattan and New York City? No, these aren't Trump supporters, and you could argue that these people had a front row seat to COVID. I mean, they understand COVID, the horrors of COVID, what COVID can do, and more importantly, what it may not do. What it may not do to young and healthy people. They've studied it closer than any of us have. They've had a front row seat to it, and they've decided, many of them, not to get vaccinated. What does that tell you?
And by the way, it's not just, I mentioned New York State just because I was just there, and I thought this is incredible that we have mandated something that has now forced us. It's like a self-imposed emergency. We said you have to adhere. If you don't adhere, and then they won't, or a large number won't, now we have to call in the National Guard. But in Los Angeles, I was reading about some of the statistics for first responders, which would be LAPD and LAFD. And, we're obviously with the engine company close to the LAFD. I know it's easy to dismiss people as anti-vaxxer psychos, 5150s, but that's why I mentioned this NBA player, because it was just I thought, a very nuanced, thoughtful minute and a half of a discussion as to what this person was thinking and why they were doing it. And look at this. Gary's got it.
We got it. And just for clarification, it's not like National Guard troops are being called in, but nurses and people who work in the healthcare industry of the National Guard shall come in and fill the void. All right, let's play the clip. This is Jonathan Isaac, by the way, 23-year-old forward for the Orlando Magic.
Jonathan, Josh Robbins with The Athletic. What is it about the vaccine that makes you hesitant to get it?
I would start with I've had COVID in the past, and so our understanding of antibodies, of natural immunity has changed a great deal from the onset of the pandemic, and is still evolving. I understand that the vaccine would help if you catch COVID, and you'll be able to have less symptoms from contracting it. But with me having COVID in the past and having antibodies with my current age group and physical fitness level, it's not necessarily a fear of mine. Taking the vaccine, like I said, it would decrease my chances of having a severe reaction, but it does open me up to the, albeit rare chance, but the possibility of having an adverse reaction to the vaccine itself. I don't believe that being unvaccinated means infected, or being vaccinated means uninfected. You can still catch COVID with or without having the vaccine. I would say, honestly, the craziness of it all, in terms of not being able to say that it should be everybody's fair choice without being demeaned or talked crazy to, doesn't make one comfortable to do what said person is telling them to do. I would say that's a couple of the reasons that, I would say I'm hesitant at this time, but at the end of the day, I don't feel that it is, anyone's reason to come out and say, well, this is why or this is not why. It should just be their decision. And, loving your neighbors, not just loving those that agree with you or look like you or move in the same way that you do. It's loving those who don't.
I want him to be the next Surgeon General. And I
tell me something. Have you, I was complaining about that generation, his generation. What is he? 23 years old. Literally 45 seconds ago, he's exhibit A of a thoughtful, nuanced, articulate, without being polemic, who just is making an argument. I disagree with him. I disagree with him probably philosophically, but boy, there isn't anybody, I think, rationally who could listen to him and say, you know, he's persuasive. He's got an argument, and he thinks about it, and he's thought about it at quite a few levels.
I concur, and I have, sort of the same thoughts every time I pass through airport security, TSA. I've been traveling a ton. Mark, you fly privately, so you don't understand this, but when you go to regular airports where the little people go, they have all these mean people who yell at you to take your belt off and take your shoes off.
Oh, my God. Put your mask on repeatedly.
Put your mask on.
God, the mask goes down while you're sleeping, and they wake you to put it back on.
Until it's time to check your ID and boarding pass, in which case they yell at you to take your mask off. So be ready.
By the way, I came in through passport control last night, and the guy told me to take the goddamn mask off. I can't hear what you're saying.
Right. So my thought every time I wait in that long security line and someone goes through the metal detector and they have their earbuds in their pocket and they're told to go back out and somebody rubs a wand over them, it's not that security isn't a good thing. And it is not that we don't need to take prophylactic measures to not have another plane blown up or flown into a building. I agree with that the same way I agree with vaccines. My thing is how do we implement it? So to me, airport security, good. Old lady being lifted out of her wheelchair while we wand her down to see if her colostomy bag has high explosives in it. Waste of time, waste of energy, and I disagree with that. So it's not a sort of, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer or COVID denier, or do you think we shouldn't have any security? I believe we should have security, and I believe we should have vaccines. It's the way they're implemented. That's where usually the rub is for me.
Well, and look, I, as somebody who is fast approaching the age at which they now want to mandate a booster shot, I think vaccines historically have been miraculous. I think somebody said today that it marked the anniversary of 90 some odd years since penicillin, and then before that, I've seen the historical analysis of George Washington inoculating the troops. Vaccines are a great thing. Basically, have eliminated all kinds of scourges. But if you can have a discussion like you started with me the other day, which is really kind of stuck with me, about what about natural immunity? If I've got natural immunity, why do I need a card that says I've gotten a vaccine when I've got antibodies, which at least, as far as we can tell from the data, at least meet, if not multiple times, exceed exponentially the immunities for natural does versus vaccination. So I think somebody's got to grapple with that. And we haven't done that.
Well, for me, who has maybe a slightly more sort of cynical and nefarious angle on this whole thing, which is, A, they do not trust you. A vaccine card says you've been vaccinated. You saying I had COVID 9 months ago, they do not believe that. I believe a lot of it is we don't believe you when you say this. The other part, the nefarious part, is the part where they make a decree and you comply. This is really what, if you were to take a snapshot of the time we're living in, it's government growing by leaps and bounds. Leaps. I mean, the government has grown more in the last 10 minutes than the first 40 years I was on the planet. I hand to God. I mean, if you really think about, I've never heard more politicians and more decrees. By the way, this existed before COVID. There was just, here's what you're going to do with your property. Here's how much water you can use. Here's how long you can take a shower. California is always the tip of the spear, but as California goes, so goes the rest of the nation. It's the government growing by leaps and bounds, giving ever more decrees, and look no further than Tin Horn Flats. They didn't do anything wrong. What they did wrong was they disobeyed the government, and for that they will be punished. I mean, I was watching footage the other day out of Australia. A guy was outside at a park smoking, and he was being tackled by the cops and beaten down to the ground for not wearing a mask. Now, you may think of that as, oh, we'll never get there. I think we're getting there pretty fucking fast. According to my calendar,
I think we got there. I think we got there before Australia. I think we were arresting people who were paddleboarding solo on the beach.
Right. So people say to me, just put the mask on, or just take the shot, or just have the vaccine passport. What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem? And my thing is the problem is we need to pump the brakes. It's growing too fast. It's got too much momentum. There are too many people that are drunk with power, and it has got its own momentum now. And when I say stop and question, like Jonathan Isaac did, the forward for the Orlando Magic, all he's doing is pumping the brakes for a second. He's saying, slow down. Let's gather ourselves. Let's look into the science of this. Let's not get over our skis. Pump the brakes. Before you put a fence around Tin Horn Flats and run them out of business, pump the brakes. And it is our job. Now, the government's not going to pump the brakes. They're in a speeding train, and they're just shoveling more coal into the furnace, and the train is going faster and faster every week. It is up to us as citizens to pump the brakes. It's not really about saying I agree or disagree. I'm just saying pump the brakes with the government overreach, which has gotten out of control.
Well, that's what, we're in front of, we filed last week in front of the U.S. Supreme Court a request for what's called a petition for certiorari to have them take the case of the outdoor dining. And you would think at first blush, and it's not the first time I've been laughed at, why would they take that? And I said, well, I think, and you and I have talked about this, Adam, countlessly for almost a year, somebody's got to say whether this 1905 Jacobson U.S. Supreme Court decision, which has become, to quote Justice Gorsuch, the towering presence, is that going, and by the way, they didn't force Jacobson, and it was a state court, not federal. They didn't force him to get vaccinated. They fined him. Back then it was $5. Somebody tweeted me the other day, well, under current inflation, it'd be something like $155. Got it. That's less than a parking ticket in a lot of places. But do we get to just declare an emergency for years? Because if we're declaring an emergency for years, just imagine if you didn't like the person who was declaring the emergency ideologically. If they weren't simpatico with you, would you be calling them authoritarian, dictatorial, usurping all of our rights, blah, blah, blah? I think you would. But God forbid when it's done in the opposite.
Oh, absolutely. I would maintain that Gavin Newsom is much more dictatorial than Donald Trump was on his worst day. All right, Mark, we'll break it off. I know you got to hop into a private jet, and I can't wait to see you in person in the next couple days here on Reasonable Doubt.
I'm very anxious.
See you soon, my friend. First, I'll tell you about BetterHelp. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? Yeah, I think for a lot of people that's happening right now, especially with COVID. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. Easy and free to change counselors if needed. Not a crisis line or self-help line. It's professional counseling done securely online. You can log in anytime. You can message your counselor. You can get timely and thoughtful responses, plus schedule weekly video or phone sessions. No uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp wants you to start living happier today. Right, Gary?
That's right. Visit BetterHelp.com/reasonabledoubt. That's BetterHelp. And join the over 2 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. Special offer for Reasonable Doubt listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/reasonabledoubt.
All right. I'm going to be in St. Louis at Helium Comedy Club October 8th and 9th, and then going to head out around Baltimore, November, and then Pennsylvania in November. Just go to adamcarolla.com for all that. You can check out our YouTube page, youtube.com/Reasonable Doubt Podcast, and our free Pluto TV channel, our Chassis TV on Pluto TV. Tons of free content there. 687. And until next time, it's Adam Carolla for Mark Garriga saying mahalo.
Thanks for listening to Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Stay tuned for more bonus episodes coming soon.